We've identified more than 10 segments which have $1 billion plus revenue potential.
Wave one was unbundling the bank. A bank used to do payments earlier, a bank used to do insurance distribution earlier, a bunch of these things. The first set of companies unbundled the bank. This wave two of companies is rebundling the bank for a specific niche. Very large homogeneous pools have been created. This is because of increasing affluence, the population growth that we have seen over the last few decades.
If you look at the B2C side of things, there are 200 million plus teenagers who think the same way, they work the same way, they have the same pain points. Start with a high frequency product as a wedge. And once those customers get used to using your product, you scale with adding multiple other products for the same segment.
That's a great analogy. I think that gives me an idea. Maybe we should do an episode in 2030 and see whether you projected enough of these phone booths. Okay, good. Sorry, I got started. Okay, let's start. Thank you. Hello. Yeah, what did I say? Okay, let's start. Hello, and welcome to SummitUp by Elevation Capital, a series where we talk about the emerging themes and spaces that excite us in the startup ecosystem in India, and our thesis on how these opportunities will get played out in the coming years. Today, we start where we left off in our previous conversation with Vaas and Kshitij on the fintech opportunities in India, and we go deeper into vertical fintech, a space that we are deeply excited about and where we have had multiple investments of late, including JODO, FamPay, Scapia, Skydo, and Flowbiz. We start where we left off last time. Welcome to the pod, guys.
Thanks, Vishy.
Let's continue to go a little bit deeper in the last part that you touched, which is vertical fintech, right? So if we had to unpack this for our listeners and just talk about why is it that we believe that this is a big space in which new fintech companies can get created and what are those opportunities? Can we go a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, okay. History time. So, if we look at the history of fintech, wave one, almost the first decade of companies that got built in the country were very product first. So, they built a payment product, they built an insurance product, they built a broking product, they built a SaaS or a software product, and so on and so forth, right? And very successful, very large outcomes created. What we think wave two is going to be actually putting the customer or a specific customer group right at the center and building a multitude of financial services for them, and maybe a little bit of commerce, maybe a little bit of software, but to completely look at all their financial needs and the financial revenue pool and go and serve that. So almost the way I think of this is wave one was unbundling the bank. A bank used to do payments earlier, a bank used to do insurance distribution earlier, a bunch of these things. The first set of companies unbundled the bank. This wave two of companies is rebundling the bank for a specific niche and bringing back all of that together. Now, the very evident question is, why aren't the incumbents doing this? I think they get served, but we do think some of these segments remain underserved today. Largely because, one, the definition of some of these segments are a little broad when we go to an incumbent or a bank. And we should talk through a little bit of some of these segments over time. And second, just the product constructs that the incumbents have, the org structures they have, their incentive structures the way they are. We don't think they do a great job of serving a bunch of these segments. And see, why is all this happening now, right? I think that's the other big question we keep thinking about, because now we're seeing a lot of companies. We have 5 companies in our portfolio in this space. I think it's a mix of factors. First, very large homogeneous pools have been created. This is because of increasing affluence, the population growth that we have seen over the last few decades. So large homogeneous pools have been created, and hence large revenue pools, large profit pools. Second, a lot of these pools have become very digitally savvy, and hence their appetite for digital financial services has increased. Third, they have also started to leave interesting digital footprints or offline footprints. So it's very easy for companies to go and target them, acquire them, and build a product for them. And fourth is financial infrastructure, whether it is KYC, other software, bunch of other things, have made it very possible to quickly stitch together a bunch of services for these guys. So almost to say, this has been 10 years in the making. But now I think it's the perfect storm of these things coming together, which allows us to build something for numerous segments. But I think the biggest and important one is a lot of these segments exist. And that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah, actually, we were doing the math and the work here, right? So more like at least we've identified more than 10 segments which have $1 billion plus revenue potential, which is what makes this very interesting, right? And this is split across B2B and B2C. So for example, if I have to give you a few examples of this, so within B2B, we have like small fleet logistics operators, again, homogeneous sort of segment, have their own set of pain points. There are almost like 1 million of them in the country. We have schools and educational institutions, right? Almost 300K plus schools and educational institutions, again, with their own specific set of pain points and needs. If you look at the B2C side of things, there are 200 million plus teenagers who think the same way, they work the same way, they have the same pain points. There is a 5 million tech workforce in India that you can solve for, right? And so on. So I think this list is ever expanding, right? I've just named a few of them, but we see a potential for a lot of these segments to emerge with immense revenue potential, and fintechs can cater to all of them.
When I hear that list from Kshitij, interesting aside, I don't know how many of you have seen this movie, Back to the Future, and maybe I'm giving up my age by talking about it. This was made in the 1980s. They were predicting 2015, right? And they did a lot of predictions around drones and ubiquitous screens and whatnot, all of which they got right. One thing which they didn't get right was in the movie, there were phone booths scattered all through the movie. So imagine flying cars and there are these phone booths, those red booths where you'd go and pick up a phone and call somebody. So there's that dissonance, right? And which is what we actually feel with some of these segments. If you think of some of these segments Kshitij spoke about, Gen Z, tech workforce, NRIs, international students, these are segments almost living a little bit in the future compared to the larger population. They are very digitally savvy, but their financial services are like phone booths. So you're a little bit stuck in the past with some of these. So almost for us, it is to find those phone booths and those segments, and then companies are going to come and take those phone booths away.
That's a great analogy. I think that gives me an idea. Maybe we should do an episode in 2030 and see whether you projected enough of these phone booths. Awesome. But this is great. So I think some of these sectors, if I as a layman were to look at and see, I can't imagine how there are $1 billion plus revenue pools, right? So for example, schools, even the fact that there are 300,000 private schools, that's a crazy number, right? But what are those unique needs that are sort of underserved for them, and why do we believe that there's a $1 billion plus value pool there for schools there?
Yeah, so let me answer that, Vishy. So see, again, as you said, there are more than 300K private schools and educational institutions. And we have to realize that all of these institutions are becoming more and more digitally savvy, as their stakeholders are becoming more digitally savvy. So the students are becoming more and more digitally savvy, and the same with parents, right? But these institutions face significant pain points, which is common across all. So one is just managing their billing and fee payment modules. So today a school has to manage multiple levels, account for scholarships, discounts, any sort of changes in school fees, etc. among multiple levels of students, right? And that is primarily done manually today. Parents on one hand some of them have to face high cash flow burdens because you have to pay the school fee one time annually, right? So this creates like a set of pain points for like schools and parents that needs to be solved for. So if we take a portfolio company, JODO, what they started with is they took this pain point up. They started with a high frequency product for schools, which is, when I say high frequency, I mean like a fee configuration system and a payments, like fee payments module, right? So schools can basically adopt this. It's a configurable product and they can make any custom logics to it, but it makes the life of a school very easy to manage fee payments, right? So this is the sort of wedge that they started with, and this is a day-to-day use case for the school, right? And once they've sort of gotten adoption for this kind of product, which is just accepting fee payments, managing your sort of fee structures, etc., they've gone on to add on multiple other products, not just for the school, but for all the stakeholders around it, which are parents as well, right? So the add-on products for a school could include something like automatic reconciliation of payments. Now think about a school, they're getting payments from parents, which is very fragmented. They're getting payments from vendors, which is again fragmented. So managing all of that is again like matching that transaction to your bank accounts becomes a hassle. So just automating that process, reconciling it automatically is an add-on feature that JODO provides. Additionally, now schools also need access to financing. So potentially JODO can offer that as well. Now, to solve for the parents' pain point, they can give one digital payment options for them to pay. Plus, they can give no-cost loans, which are like convenience products for parents to just pay monthly without any interest, right? So this is an example of how a player can identify a homogeneous set of customers with very similar pain points, start with the high frequency product as a wedge, and once those customers get used to using your product, you scale with adding multiple other products for the same segment.
So see, I'll give you two more examples, both from portfolio, to bring this to life. So look at Skydo. They're solving for the exporter SMB persona in India. And they started with solving for the payments collection use case, cross-border payment collection, which was a very broken process. And they built a product which is just much better in terms of price, stat, visibility, everything else. And from there on, they will expand into financing, software needs of this persona, compliance needs, analytics, and a bunch of other things. Or another example is FamPay, which is solving for the teenager or the Gen Z persona. They started with solving for the UPI payment use case here. Again, something which was very broken, and probably the phone booth analogy we spoke about comes best to life here. And once they solved that, they went into other payment use cases, e-commerce, savings, wealth products, and a bunch of other things.
Excellent. This has been super fascinating, Vaas and Kshitij. I think anybody who's interested in this space, looking at building, it's gonna spark a few ideas surely for them, right? What would you advise a young entrepreneur looking to build out a vertical fintech today in India? What would you advise him or her?
I think most important thing, come speak to us. But jokes aside, I think maybe two things in the short term and one more longer term thinking. One is, I would say, really obsess on this user group and find a wedge. The wedge needs to be somewhere where the pain point is extremely severe. You can build a 10x better product. And it is very high frequency. It's very difficult to start with a wedge, very low frequency wedge, and build something out of that. Second is, I think they have to think very differently on how do you acquire this user group. And actually, there are very interesting ideas to do this, right? Like there are ways, there are watering holes, there are specific areas you can go and acquire them versus the typical performance marketing or typical other methods that you do. So if you have these two figured out, I think it's a great start. And then more long term, you have to start thinking about how do you cross-sell things to them. Effectively, you want to attack the whole revenue pool with this customer base. And once you think of a roadmap for that, that builds out the whole business. But as I said, most important thing, come talk to us.
Awesome. I think I have one last piece of advice, which is we'll put the link in the description below, but do check out the bottom line reports by the team, because it has a ton of insights that we'll keep building on and getting deeper on. And there's surely some content over there that's going to spark some ideas for you. Thanks.